Okay, so in Parshas Miketz, Perek Mem Aleph, Pasuk Mem Daled. Vayomer Paroi el Yosef ani faroi. Uvil odecha lo yorim ish es yodoi ves ragloi b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. So what does ani faroi mean? So some say it means I am Paroi and therefore I can decree. I'm the one who gets to say how things go. And some say it means ani faroi, while I am reserving the position of Paroi, I am giving you absolute power that without your permission no one can raise hand or foot. So that's similar to what it says in Pasuk Mem, Rak hakise egdal mimeko. Okay, now he told him ani faroi and this absolute power, giving him everything. We're saying no one but for him or without his permission, Ibn Ezra says, can raise hand or foot. So the Mizmar in Tehillim that we've been tracking, that explicitly talks about this parasha, about Yosef going out to Mitzrayim, Mizmar Pei Aleph. There it says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha hama'alcha me'eretz Mitzrayim ma'acha picha maleu. So I am Hashem who takes you up from the land of Mitzrayim. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. And there's a correspondence here, which is that Paroi said to Yosef, that's of course Eidos b'Yosef Samay b'Tzeis Eretz Mitzrayim, so it tracks Yosef leaving and going out to Mitzrayim. And Yosef was told, b'Tzeis Eretz Mitzrayim, he was told, Ani Faroi, and you have control of everything. And corresponding to that, it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, who takes you up from the land of Mitzrayim. So Yosef is, as we've discussed, Yosef is trapped in Mitzrayim, and he's cooperating with Paroi. And the ideal freedom, which Yosef's got a taste of when he was freed from the bar, but didn't complete. The ideal freedom is Hama'al Chamet Mitzrayim, to leave not just the jail within Mitzrayim, but to leave the whole Mitzrayim. And then Harchef Picham Amalehu, we could open our mouths and ask for anything. Now, so that's Ani Paroi corresponds to Anochi Hashem. And he uses this word Biladecha, which is a very important word because, of course, Yosef earlier said, Biladai, it's not me, Elikim Yanesh Leim Paroi. So before Yosef said, Biladai, it's not me, it's God. And here, Paroi says, I am Paroi, and you have all the power, no one but you. So if you read that before Yosef was saying Biladai, it's not me. And here it's no one but Yosef, the same Biladecha. So because earlier Yosef said, Biladai, it's not me, it's Hashem. But this Ani Paroi stands in the place of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So basically this is the whole power structure of Mitzrayim. Is Ani Paroi u Biladecha lo yoram ish. That Paroi is the one who's control, and it's like a denial of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Paroi and I could decree what I want. And before you were being very firm and saying Biladai lekim yanesh leim Paroi, and here Paroi is saying no, it's only about me and you because I have all the power. So basically, the Ani Paroi over here is a denial of Elikim, because Paroi is saying, look, I'm Paroi, I'm the one who decides things, and therefore there's no power to anyone but for you. So this is like the hepech of what Yosef said earlier, Biladai. Okay, now lo yoram ish es yodai. So lo yorim ish es yad ves ragli. No one will pick up hand or foot. So some people point out that yorim es yad is an expression used for srara, for a position of power, and we find that significantly in the context of Yeravam, in Malachim Aleph Perek Yud Aleph, where the pasuk says, Perek Yud Aleph pasuk Chavav, v'Yeravam ben Nevat Efrasi min Atzeredo, v'Yorim Yad B'Melech, v'Zeh Hadavar Shehirim Yad B'Melech. So he was Meir Yad B'Melech, and he was a Gibar Chayil, and Shlomo saw the nar that he's Oisei Malach, and he put him in the position v'Yafkid Oisei L'chol Sevel Beis Yosef. We spoke a lot about these words over here, that we spoke about these words that like Yosef does malacha and has sevel, and he's a nar, and that's what prepares him to be king. So to Yeravam was Oisei malacha, and he's vayafkid. He gets a position Sevel Beis Yosef, and of course there further Achi Ashilon, you find Yerovam on the derech, and he rips his clothing, and they were out in the Sada, so this is like V'im Tza'eu Ish V'hinei Toya Basada, as we spoke at length. But either way, there it says that Yerovam was Merim Yad, to lift his hand against the king. So that's like to take power. And here Yosef is told no one but him is allowed to pick up his hand and take control, take power. And there in Perikut Aleph, in Malachim Aleph, it says that Shlomo wanted to kill Yerovam, Vayakom Yerovam Vayirach Mitzrayim. Al Shishak Malach Mitzrayim, Vahim Mitzrayim Ad Shlomo. So Yosef was almost killed by his brothers, and he took refuge in Mitzrayim. And when I say took refuge in Mitzrayim, obviously that's where he ended up surviving. But also, as we've been discussing, we'll see more tonight, the fact that Yosef is cooperating with Parai indicates that Yosef sees Mitzrayim as being powerful, and the Nevi'im criticize him for that because he should realize that Mitzrayim is worthless, and he shouldn't think that they're dependable. So, like Yerovam, who's Miriam Yad in the Melech Shlomo and ends up becoming king, Yosef too, who ends up becoming king, he works his way to power through his association with Parai. And Yerovam runs away to Mitzrayim when he's consolidating his power that started with him being Miriam Yad. Okay, just pointing that out. Now, no one could raise hand and foot. So the chayr, what it means to raise, no one could raise their foot, is that people don't have freedom of motion except according to Yosef. In other words, Yosef has the right to arrest people, which is exactly, and I think this is what the pasuk is coming from, what it says in Tehillim, Kuf Hey. It says that Yosef was freed by the king, and he was made a master. He was given the power to, or lesser, to arrest, to lock up this arm of Paris. So that's what this pasuk says, that no one has the right to move a foot, to lift a foot, unless Yosef allows them to. And I think also what this is leading up to is that Yosef is going to arrest people, and arrest people specifically in the context of looking into whether they have a right to freely travel the land. And that's going to happen with his brothers, who are going to come into Mitzrayim, and Yosef is going to take an interest in them and say, no, you're meraglim, which is people who have no right to be meir regel. And because of his judgment of them as meraglim, he's going to lock them up. Which is because no one has a right to no one has freedom of motion unless he grants it. So he's the one who decides who can roam the country and who cannot, who's a meragil, and who's allowed to use his regel in the right way, and has proper legitimate business in roaming Mitzrayim. And he's going to decide who has no right to do that and therefore has to be locked up. And there too, he says, this is in Perek Beis, in Parashas Miketz, twice he says Chei Paroi, that I'm not going to let you leave, and Chei Paroi, that you're meraglim. So this Chei Paroi parallels the fact that he was given this power, he was given this authority to grant or withhold freedom of motion by Paro's declaration, Ani Paroi u'biladecha. So therefore, when he executes this power that he was invested with, it's very appropriate that he says, Chei Paroi. He swears by Paroi, who gave him this power, declaring Ani Paroi. So, okay. So then it's very interesting because Yosef gets this, then if we put it all together, Yosef gets this freedom. He gets freed from jail and given this freedom, but the freedom is biladecha, only he has this freedom. His brothers, pointedly, are deprived of this freedom. Dafka deprived of this freedom by Yosef, while the true freedom from Mitzrayim is when everyone becomes free, right? Yosef experienced a little bit of foreshadowing of this freedom because he was a slave in Mitzrayim and then he became free. But it's a certain kind of freedom, the rules of which are Ani Paroi, and you have power to deprive other people from freedom, and indeed he used that power against the rest of the nation, his brothers, until the whole Am Yisrael went free in Sefer Shmais. Okay, pasuk Mehmei. Vayikov Ari Shem Yosef tzafnas paneach v'yitnes asnas bas b'tifera koyinoin liisha vayetze Yosef al Mitzrayim. So here's the vayetze Yosef al Mitzrayim. That's b'tzeisai al Mitzrayim from Tehillim Pei Aleph. Now he named him tzafnas paneach. So what does this mean? So there's a big question: is it Egyptian or is it Hebrew? And the B'nai comments. He says if it's Hebrew, we don't know what Yosef's Egyptian name was, and if it's Egyptian, then we don't know what it means. It says Ibn Ezra. There's a lot of speculation what it means, but no one really figured it out, from what I could tell. Now, just a comment on the idea of it perhaps being Hebrew. The letters of these names, Tzadik, Pei, Nun, Saf, Pei, Ayin, Nun, Ches, these are all letters that you'll find in Egyptian names, like Potifera, Parai, Potifar, Baal Tzefain, Noif, Tach, Panches, and parenthetically Pinchas is an Egyptian name. The Pei, the Nun, the Ches, the Tzadik. So it just suggests that it's an Egyptian name. Okay, but I want to say like this. So we have a problem now. I mean, as Ibn Ezra points out, if this is Yosef's Egyptian name, then we have no idea what it means. Okay, so what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is, to me, is that, okay, you have this pasuk saying that Pari gave Yosef a name, and it doesn't tell us, and there's no indication, there's no way we could know what the name means. But I think that's a very obvious explanation for that, because if you look at Tehillim Pei Aleph, what does it say there? What does it say about Yosef? Like it says in this pasuk, Yosef Sfas lo yadati eshma. You're a foreign language. So I think that's the very point of this pasuk, is that look, Yosef gave him this, Pari gave him this weird name which we can't even understand because it's Egyptian. So there's supposed to be a Sfas lo yadati here to teach us, look, Yosef gets a shame. And the shame is in the foreign language, and we can't explain it. So I think that's the very point. Okay. So he gives him a wife of Asnas, as Asnas is his wife, the daughter of Potifera, who's a Kohen. Kohen, says the Ibn Ezra, always means a mishares. Some people want to say that Kohen sometimes means a minister. Ibn Ezra says his opinion is Kohen is always a mishares, and he was a Kohen of Ein. Okay, now, let's talk about this Ein. Ein. People identify scholars, but I found the first reference is actually in the Shivim, the Targum Shivim, the Septuagint and Shmais. That's, I think, the first reference. That Ein is Beis Shemesh, or Heliopolis. A city called Heliopolis, which means Beis Shemesh. Now, why is that significant? That's the Septuagint in Shmais, Parak Aleph. It talks about Pisav and Ramses, and there it adds an Ein, which is Heliopolis. Heliopolis, by the way, means sun, city of the sun, right? So that's Beis Shemesh. And it's called Beis Shemesh in Sefer Yemei, as we will see. So I'm assuming, even though I see no evidence from either Tanakh or from Chazal, I don't see any clear evidence, which doesn't make me doubt the identity, but it does, very importantly, it doesn't make me doubt the identity of Ein with Beis Shemesh or Heliopolis, but it does make me wonder how we're supposed to darshan this. And you'll see what I'm meaning. I'm going to darshan. We'll talk about what the significance is of Ein and Beis Shemesh, but usually we find things in the Tanakh. This is just a fact, a historical fact, which, okay, so that's what it is. What it is. So it's identifying Ein with the city called House of the Sun, and it's very significant because Ra, the Egyptian god Ra, is the god of the sun, which is hence the name Potiphar Ra. The exact etymology in that in Egyptian, you could look in whatever you want to look that up. But the point is that there's Ra. There's Ra in his name, and which is the sun god, and he's a Kohen Ein. And Ein was the place. Ein was the place where it was also called Beis Shemesh because they worshipped the sun there. Okay, so this pasuk then obviously is a great association with Avodah Zarah. He's a Kohen. He has Ra in his name. It's the name of the sun god, and he's in the city that was the city of the worship of the sun god, and it's very significant, as we shall see. But first, I just want to point out then, okay, so we have an Avodah Zarah association here right away, which makes a lot of sense, as it says in Tehillim Pei Aleph. Lo yevecha el zar. Hashem wants us to come out of Mitzrayim and not have an el zar, not have an el necho. And Yosef, who's not quite leaving Mitzrayim, has this connection with the el necho. Okay? And let me show you what we have in Yeshaya Perek Yud Tes. Yeshaya Perek Yud Tes, as we've been discussing parallels of Parsha very much. And Yeshaya Perek Yud Tes talks about how the Egyptian wise men don't know what they're talking about. They think they do, but they really don't. This is, of course, a major theme in the Torah about the Navi, or the Chacham with the Ruach Elikim, who proves to be wiser than the Chatumei Mitzrayim and Chachamecha. And we have that in Perek Yotes. We spoke about a lot of the parallels, and there's something very important about a sun city. The other pasuk says like this. The pasuk where it talks about Mitzrayim is going to come around and recognize the greatness of Hashem. Okay, and there it says, and we spoke about that too in the past, that Yosef had an opportunity to bring Mitzrayim into the fold, and that's why it says in the end of Yeshaya Perek Yotes, Baruch Ami Mitzrayim. We spoke about that yet when Pari said to Yosef, Atotia al Ami. Yosef was supposed to realize, Lu Ami Shemeli, whose Am is he? But eventually Mitzrayim is going to become Ami, because there is this cooperation between us and Mitzrayim, and Yosef could have turned Mitzrayim into Ami of Hashem. Okay, that's Baruch Ami Mitzrayim that we spoke about a few weeks ago. But either way, there it says, Perek Yotes Yeshaya Pasuk Yotes, Bayomahu Yiyu Chamesh Arim Ba'aretz Mitzrayim. There are going to be 5 cities in the land of Mitzrayim. Medabros Sfas Canaan. There are going to be 5 cities that speak the language of Canaan. V'nish ba'ois l'Hashem tzivokos, and swear to Hashem. Ir haheres ye'omer le'echos. One of them will be called Ir haheres. Okay, now, this speaking of Sfas Canaan, we spoke about Sfas lo yadati eshma, and there's this foreign language. One day there's going to be the language of Canaan. And there it says, one of the cities is going to be called Ir haheres. Ir haheres, which means city of destruction. Heres is in destruction. Targum says over there, Karta de Beis Shimsha, which is going to be destroyed. So he explains Heres is like Cheres. Cheres means the sun. It's a pasuk in E24. Cheres v'lo Yizrach, I think it's a pasuk. So Cheres means the sun. So Targum says Ir HaHeres is actually Ir HaCheres, the sun city, as in Beis Shemesh. There was a city in Mitzrayim called Beis Shemesh, which is going to be destroyed. Okay, now so Heres means Cheres. Now I want to just explain to you. Well, the pasuk says Heres, so how can you say it means Cheres? I think the Ibn Ezra says Hamachlif Ches Behei is Matmiyah. What do you mean? What do you mean? How can you explain the pasuk that says Ir HaHeres as referring to Ir HaCheres, the sun city? Okay, but the answer is like this. If you look at the end of Yehoshua, Yeshua was buried in a place called Timnas Serach. This is Perek of Daled. Pasuk Lamed Vayikbur Oisei Begulnach Alasei B'Simnach Serach. And in Sefer Shoftim, the same place, in Sefer Shoftim Perek, Beis Pasuk Tes, it says they buried Yeshua in Timnas Cheres. So which one is it? Was it Timnas Cheres or was it Timnas Serach? The answer is Timnas Cheres is so called because it's the sun. Cheres is the sun, and this was a place where there was sun worship. I think some people say even Timnas Cheres, like Tmunas Cheres. There was a Tmuna of the sun. Right? Can't make a Tmuna of the sun. Because it was called Al Shem the sun, and because of the sun worship, therefore they Mechana Shem Lignai, instead of calling it Timnas Cheres, they called it Timnas Serach. Serach is like to stink, and that's to be Mechana Shem Lignai to Avodah Zarah. Okay, so there similarly then we have the city that's really called Ir HaCheres, but in Yeshaya it calls it Ir HaHeres, the city of destruction. Okay, so that's why Targum says Ir HaHeres is really Ir HaCheres, because what we're doing is we're taking the name Cheres and we're giving it a different name, just like in Yeshua we call it Serach instead of Cheres, so we also call it Heres instead of Cheres. Now, we'll soon see why he says destruction, why. We'll soon see what there's an association dafka between destruction and the city called Beis Shemesh or Hacheres. So now, just to say Pshat and Pasuk. So the Pasuk says there are going to be 5 cities in Mitzrayim where they swear by Hashem and speak the language of Canaan, and one of them will be called Ir HaHeres. So what's the significance of that? Of saying one of them will be called Ir HaHeres? You're not telling me all the 5 names. What does the Pasuk mean? I think the Pshat is the Pasuk. That is the very point of the Pasuk. One of the cities is going to be called Ir HaHeres, which is actually not its real name. Its real name is something else. It's Cheres, which is sun. And they're going to call it Heres. So that's an illustration of what the Pasuk says. The Pasuk says, this is again, Yeshaya, Yotes, Yotes. There are going to be 5 cities where they speak this Sfas Canaan and swear to Hashem Tzivakos. And because they speak the Svas Canaan and swear to Hashem Tzavakas, the paradigmatic, the example of speaking B'Svas Canaan and swearing to Hashem Tzavakas is that there's going to be a city that's going to be called Heres. Why is that an example? Because since they speak the Svas Canaan and swear to Hashem, there's going to be a city that's actually the antithesis of that, because it's the worship of the sun. So but they swear to Hashem and speak the Svas Canaan, so therefore they're going to take a word from the Svas Canaan and use that to be Mechan Hashem to that city, which is Al Shem Avodah Zarah, because they swear to Hashem. So that's the very point of the pasuk. Now, this, by the way, I'm about to tell you now, Rashi in Yeshaya points out this whole thing, that in Yirmiyah Perek Mem Gimel, pasuk Yud Gimel, it says, V'shibar es matzvos beis Shemesh, the king of Babel, I think, is going to come to Mitzrayim, and Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to burn down the house of the gods of Mitzrayim, big theme, right? And V'shibar es matzvos beis Shemesh, asher be'es Mitzrayim, be'es batei Elohei Mitzrayim Yisei. He's going to burn the matzvos of beis Shemesh. So Beis Shemesh he's going to break, smash, V'shibar, he's going to smash the matzvos of Beis Shemesh. So the matzvos of Beis Shemesh are going to be smashed. So therefore, when it says in Yeshaya that there's a city called Ir HaHeres, which means to smash, and then the next pasuk says, so the city is going to be Heres, that's the matzvos of Beis Shemesh, because they're going to serve Hashem and swear by Hashem. And there's going to be Mizbech and Matzev Hashem, and therefore the Matzvos Beis Shemesh are going to be smashed, and the city is going to be called Ir HaHeres, because they're going to destroy the Matzvos of the Shemesh and replace it with the Mizbech. Okay. Now, so remember the pasuk says it's going to be called Ir HaHeres, and so again, this is Oin. The city Oin became Ir HaHeres, or Ir HaCheres, because Ein is the sun god, and they worshipped, also called Beis Shemesh. Now you know why I was saying Beis Shemesh, also called Beis Shemesh in Yeshaya, in Yirmiyah, and Akinu Lignai in Yeshaya, when they speak the Svas Canaan and swear to Hashem Tzavakas, is that it's going to be called Ir HaHeres. So, as we mentioned, Yosef receives from Parai, Ani Parai, and he starts swearing Chei Parai, and he has this association with Avodah Zarah because he marries the daughter of the Kohen of Ein. And that's because Svas lo yadati eshma b'tzeis al Mitzrayim. But once they're going to speak the Svas Canaan and swear to Hashem, they're going to say Ir HaHeres. They're going to swear to Hashem instead of saying Chei Parai. Right? Yosef just learned Ani Parai, who has the real power, and he starts swearing by that Chei Parai instead of saying Chei Hashem. And he has also this association with the Svas lo yadati because it's Safnas Paneach, and he's marries the daughter of the Kohen of Ein, but the day will come where they'll speak the Svas Canaan and swear by Hashem Tzavakas when Ir HaHeres, when this very same city, Ein, the one whose Kohen Yosef's daughter married, Yosef's the daughter of whose Kohen Yosef married, when that becomes Heres instead of Cheres, which is the word in the Svas Canaan that denotes that we destroy the Avodah Zarah, that's what they're going to swear by Hashem Tzavakas. Okay. Now, Ein is also called Oven. This is in Yechezkel Perek Lamed Pasuk Yud Zayin. It talks about lists a bunch of cities in Mitzrayim that are going to be destroyed. Yechezkel Perek Lamed Pasuk Yud Zayin. It talks about Pasuk Tez Zayin talks about Eish Mitzrayim, and then Bachure Oven are going to fall by the sword. So Oven is identified with Ein. Okay. So that's another Kinu Legnai. Right? Just like Ir HaCheres or Beis Shemesh becomes Ir HaHeres, so it's also called Ein, and Yechezkel turns that to Oven, iniquity. And this Kinoi, this turning a name, using the name Oven for a place of Avodah Zarah, Yeshaya does this all the time, which is significant. Maybe we'll see that soon. That Beis El is called Beis Oven because it became a place of Avodah Zarah. Similarly, Ein becomes Oven, and Ir HaCheres becomes Ir HaHeres, like we find Timnas Cheres in Eretz Yisrael. Timnas Cheres obviously is in Eretz Yisrael, but in Mitzrayim there's a place called Ir HaCheres, which is changed to Ir HaHeres. Like in Eretz Yisrael, they changed the name of Timnas Cheres to Timnas Serach. Of course, you could ask about Beis Shemesh in Eretz Yisrael. There is a city Beis Shemesh. They didn't change the name. Why is that the case? Fine. We're not going to go into that. has nothing to do with this year. Okay, now I want to show you a few more things. Take a look at Yeshaya. Now that we know all this, now we can understand a passage in Yeshaya Perek Lamed Aleph. Yeshaya Perek Lamed Aleph at the beginning, it talks about going down to Mitzrayim and relying on Mitzrayim. Hoy hayard Mitzrayim le'ezra, al susim yisha'enu, vayivtuchu al rechav ki rav, va'al parashim ki atzma moed, v'loy sha'u al kadosh Yisrael v'Hashem lo darashu, v'gam hu chacham v'yavei ra. That's dvar v'loy hesir, v'kom al beis Miriam, v'al ezras poyale oven, u'Mitzrayim adam v'loy eil, susayim basa v'loy ruach. Okay, so they go down to Mitzrayim for help, and they rely on them, and they think they're so powerful, instead of paying attention to Kadosh Yisrael. And Hashem is wise, and He brings Ra, and He's going to stand up on the base Miriam, and those who are helped to Payali Oven. And Mitzrayim is man and not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit. Okay, so let's start from the end. There's a Hamamina that Mitzrayim is God, but they're not. Now this is mamish what we're dealing with over here. Para replaces Hashem. Ani para replaces Hashem, and Che para replaces Nishbos Hashem Tzvakis. That's a big mistake, because Mitzrayim is Adam V'loy El, and don't rely on their power. Ha'hayod Mitzrayim la'Ezra, as we discussed in Yeshaya in the end of Perek Chav Tes and Lamed, is about Yosef. You ended up going down to Mitzrayim, and you think Mitzrayim has a power that you can rely on. This is the whole thing about Yosef working with Mitzrayim. And instead, you should have focused on Kadosh Yisrael. Kadosh Yisrael is a keynote for Yosef. Obviously, so to speak, the good aspect of Yosef. Let's say he's called Kadosh Yisrael, as we discussed. It says that earlier in Yeshaya. But okay, we don't have to go into that too. I'm just saying there's another remez there, and there it says V'gam hu chacham v'yavei ra. Hashem brings ra, brings the evil, and he stands up against those who help the poyale oven. So I think that's another remez. That's a remez to he marries Potiphar, and the king, the god, the sun god is called Ra, and Hashem brings Ra as an evil against those who rely on Mitzrayim and those who are poyale oven. So Yosef here marries the Potiphar Kohen Oin's daughter, and because he's boiteach, because he thinks that vayivtuchu al rechav ki rav, and he sort of treats Mitzrayim as El v'loy adam, because he accepts ani pare, and that's what Yeshaya is working against that. And all these Ramazan. Okay? Alright, I want to add one thing which is not so batuach, but it's interesting. I'll leave it to you to judge. And this is in Hosea Perek Yud Beis. Hosea Perek Yud Beis, it talks about Ephraim, says this is in, it's actually the Haftorah of Parshas Vayetzev this week. Actually, it's a few seconds before it, I think. Anyways, so there it says like this. Right. It says the following. Hosea Perek Yud Beis Pasuk Tes. Vayomer Ephraim ach asharti matzosi oin li. I'm wealthy and I have oin. And there oin means power. And it says, I have no chatoim. Kol yigi ay lo yimtzuli avon chashachet. You can't find anything wrong with me. Okay, but really I am Hashem. So Mitzrayim says I have oin, I have everything's good with me, I have power. And then the pasuk says, but I am Hashem. And then it talks about that Hashem gives Nevi'im. Okay, so let me just tell you what the idea is, and then I'll tell you what I'm reading in the psukim. So Yosef has associated with oven, with oin, and Ephraim, of course, is Yosef's childhood, and thinks that this power is he has his own power, and really Anochi Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim, we spoke about Nipare corresponds to Anochi Hashem Elokecha Ha'mal Chomer Mitzrayim, and there further in Hosea it says that Hashem gave much chazon to the Nevi'im, and then it talks about, I'm going to say this very briefly, it talks about Yaakov worked for an Isha Ubenavi Hela Hashem Mitzrayim. This I speak about in my Sefer in Mishas Yaakov, first piece. That the way to get out of Mitzrayim, Benavi Hela Sisomi Mitzrayim, the way to get out of Mitzrayim is through a Navi, because to leave Mitzrayim means to have Das Hashem. And Yigia is the opposite of Das Hashem, because if you have Das, you have Menucha. So through a Navi, Hashem took Yisrael out of Mitzrayim means that it's through Das Hashem that we get out of Mitzrayim. So it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha Ha'ma'al Mitzrayim, it's offering Das Hashem, but Ephraim rejects it. They're Moisef Lachtoi, they're guilty with the Baal, they make a Masecha. And then again, V'anochi Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim, So what the pasuk is saying is like this: that Yosef is not accepting or not availing himself of this idea of this haftach of Neicha Hashem Lekach Mitzrayim, and instead he says Matzasi Oin Li, I have my own power, and that's really a rejection of the possibility of nevuah. And this we spoke about a lot. That Yosef, who's the dreamer, he's the one who's working against nevuah, and nevuah is what, as the pasuk says again, Yeshaya Pekud Beis Pasuk Gidal, B'Navi Helash Hashem Mitzrayim. You need a navi to take you out of Mitzrayim and to bring you the message of Neicha Hashem Lekecha. Yosef, who's a dreamer and not a navi, therefore is stuck in Mitzrayim and stuck with this oin, thinking Matzasi Oin Li, and everything will be fine for me, but it won't.